overdue. This was supposed to be for last year, and I think I was going to do it around something specific, but I can't remember what that was now. I don't know if it was going to be around a TV show or an event that was happening, but it's Friday, so I'm just going to let it ride. We can talk about stuff pertaining to Gen X, um, stuff like that. Um, one of my moderators wanted me to talk about how Trump is the new Ronald Reagan, and I just thought, first of all, I don't know that much about Reagan to make that comparison because I was a little kid when Reagan was in office. Two, Reagan is only a point of reference for boomers, like, and maybe some very old Gen Xers. The Gen Xers who were like already 16, 17 years old in 1981. Like, for them. Um, you know, for the majority of for the Gen Xers who were born in the late 70s, like myself, like, no, like, we don't care. Like, that's not a point of reference to really that we would really care about, because we were kids. We were caring about cartoons and toys and big wheels and the ice cream truck back in the early 80s, because I'm a Zennial. Zennials are like mic that hybrid generation between millennials and Gen X that were born between 77 and 83. So most of us would not know anything about Reagan aside from the stuff that we heard from our parents, or that we later heard about in the news like 10 years later or 20 years later, whatever. But yeah, I just wanted to. So this is sort of gonna be a ask me anything, but pertaining to like Generation X, because looking at my analytics, most of the people who watch me do fall within that that age range of older millennials to Gen X. Even a few baby boomers, but mostly people who are either elder millennials or Generation X. Not so much so the Gen Z generation or Boomer generation. So, uh, so I think I should start off making clear what Generation X is. So this term didn't come out until like I believe the late '90s or the 2000s. Before then, they used to just call us the Lost Generation. Unfortunately, there already is a Lost Generation, so they had to rename it. I think the the Pew Research Center name uh, coined the terms of the different cultural generations. But Generation X are people born from 1965 to 1980. So that's generally Gen X, people born between 1965 and 1980. And then again, I want to also include Zennials. Zennials are both Gen X and the first millennials who have a who form a sort of a hybrid cultural generation, born between 1977 and 1983, which is also called the Star Wars generation because it was in that era that the original Star Wars trilogy came out. So I'm specifically a Zenio. What's up, Carlton? Let me while I'm doing this, let me check my my chat filter, make sure I'm getting all the messages, even though it's mostly a bunch of uh, blithering morons. Um, and let me make sure my cloud bot is activated. Yep, yep, yep. But yeah, so like I said, a lot of people don't even know what Gen X is. Like they always either throw us in with the boomer camp or the millennial camp, and we're neither. Younger people throw us in with the boomer camp, which is a insult, and the boomers and the silent generation throw us in with the millennials, and we're not. My father used to do that. He should know better. Like he called me a millennial. I'm like, no, I'm not. I was like, but he's a stereotypical baby boomer. He like he calls everyone younger a millennial because he doesn't know how to make those distinctions. Too bad he couldn't make those distinctions when it came to other things either, but that's neither here nor there. Um, and he's one of those people that think that millennials destroyed society. I'm like, yeah, okay. Suffice to say, I don't talk to the man anymore. Carlton says Gen X is the turn up generation. We used to. Funny thing is, we stay at home now, and ironically, so do the younger people because they don't want to go out and turn up like that. Some do, but like the clubs are dead now. Like I've seen how the clubs are now. People don't even dance with each other. All the girls stay in a little flock together, hoping that some guy who's gonna be like a baller comes in and pops bottles for them. Meanwhile, the guys are off to the cut, trying to talk to these girls, but they're really not dancing like they did in the 90s and the 2000s. So I'm glad I'm not part of Gen Z where you go to the club and you're not even gonna get any play unless you're like spending a lot of money or women think that you're famous or insanely attractive. Like going places like DC Live back in the late 90s and 2000s. I remember it was so packed. You would just dance with everyone because it was literally like everyone was like wall to wall. Like you like it was so packed in there. I'm pretty sure it was a fire hazard. It had to be a fire hazard because it was so many people in there. You would just dance because people were that close up on you. Like you couldn't move anywhere because there was so many people in there. Like I said, it would be a fire hazard. And if you were claustrophobic, it would be a nightmare. But it was just like booty everywhere. Like I remember like a new song, the DJ would just spin a new song and the girl is already on you just because it's so crowded. And so you're dancing and she just look back to start dancing with you. Of course, they give you the look back to just make sure you don't look like Shrek. Since I'm don't look like Shrek or Quasimodo, I never had the problem with the look back. If you don't know about the look back, I don't know what to tell you. But that was a thing at a party or a club where you try to dance with a girl and they give you the look back to to see whether you're worth dancing. If if you were worth them dancing with you, and if they start dancing with you, they liked you. So that was cool. But clubs today are dead. Now overseas, no. The If you go overseas, the clubs are like they were back in the 90s and the 2000s, in the 99 and the 2000s. But yeah, overseas, you go places like Thailand and Cambodia, Europe, well, parts of Europe. I would say continental Europe, not the UK. The UK is just as cooked as the US. Actually, the UK is worse than the US. It's worse. But if you go to continental Europe, not the UK, or you or in Asia, then you're good to go. Latin America as well. Africa, I'm not sure. I think they still turn up in many of these African countries. I'm just not interested in turning up in an African country, just because of my own personal preferences. But yeah, because back in the '90s, people actually had dance offs. Yeah, man, these Gen Z are too fat and out of shape to do dance offs. Like you look at the stuff we how we used to dance in the as kids in the '90s, or for the older Gen X in the '80s, and you're like, God damn, what like were they sprinkling our food with cocaine? Like, why, how are we dancing like that? But it's because we ate healthier food and we weren't fat. Like, if you look, I'm sorry, you look at the typical black person today, they're fat. I'm, they're fat. Like, I've never, like, it's weird. I've never seen so many fat young people before as this generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. I don't know what they're eating because I ate like a horse when I was younger, but I still wasn't fat. But again, we would I don't know. I think we were just more physically active. For one, we still had to take PE every day in school, and we had recess. So we're playing sports in gym and at recess. Or even if I didn't play sports during recess, I'm probably like walking around, talking with people, still being physically active. But I don't know. I think part of it is a lack of physical education. Um, Definitely something to do with the food and the fact that a lot of these men are lacking testosterone, which makes them like fat, like fat and feminine and sluggish. Carlos is bad diet, not moving. Yeah, like I said, I think a bit of it has to do with lower testosterone levels because we know that Gen Z has the lowest testosterone levels of any generation, and in contemporary history. Like millennials have higher, Gen X has higher than them, Boomer has higher, Silent Generation, and so on. But yeah, I would not spend my money in a club. And really, the new club is the gym, the fitness gym. Like most people go to hit the gym. That's where they're hollering at girls. That's where you're having fun because they pump like they pump music through the speakers at the gym, or you can just listen to your own music. Um, these places like Planet Fitness are open 24/7, so you can get it in anytime you want. Pause. um, Regardless of Gen X and old millennials were the last tough generation. Yeah, I mean, the thing is that can always change with Gen Z and Gen Alpha because you know the so-called greatest generation, the ones that fought World War II and the Korean War, before before the war, they were considered a lost cause too. Like they were considered weak men, but they stepped up in a time of crisis. People adapt. I'm pretty sure if there was a global crisis, Gen Z would step up to the plate just like the greatest generation did back in the in the 1940s. I think they would step up just the same. Or the people from the lost generation, which is the first generation of the 20th century, the lost generation, they stepped up to fight World War I. during the Gilded Age, which was like a age of like a gener. It was a time of like cultural decadence and stuff like that. They stepped up to the plate. I'm pretty sure Gen Z will step up to the plate if if a crisis did occur. And there's always this red pill fantasy that we need World War III to toughen up our men. It, I often say that too, but I really don't believe there will be a World War III in our lifetime. I could be wrong. There will be wars, but a World War III is looking less and less likely as the history of violence shows it is decreasing. Violence, both when it comes to wars, to sexual violence, to domestic sort of um, violence and aggression and all, like that's been steadily going down for centuries. Um, so I really don't think there's going to be, because people always say, how close are we to World War III, and I'm like, there's no telling. Because like I said, when World War I started, it started with the assassination of some archduke of a unimportant European country. So every time there's a crisis, so every time there's like some sort of international conflict going on in the news cycle, and people start clutching their pearls, thinking this is going to be the beginning of World War III. I'm like, yeah, let's just chill on that, because people have been predicting that since the '60s, and we have not had World War III. Um, it can always happen, of course, but I think no matter how soft we think our current men are, they will adapt and rise to the challenge. And if not, so be it. But look, if the men of the early 20th century could rise to the occasion in World War II, and they were considered soft in their era, I'm pretty sure Gen Z or Gen Alpha after them could likely do the same. So Gen Alpha's children may have to fight in World War III. My thing is, I don't think there's going to be a World War III. I think war is going to be more localized. Um, I think this is why the military has converted to more urban warfare type of scenarios, because these are the type of wars that are going to be more likely fought on the ground, are going to be these localized um, urban sort of conflicts. I don't see any evidence that we're coming closer to a World War III. Like I said, if it happens, it happens. But in whoever's generation in which it happens, the men of that age will step up to do what they have to do, as they have in previous generations. Human nature doesn't really change, at least not that much. Um, so I just I'm just doubtful that there's gonna be a World War III, because like I said, it's people have been predicting World War III since the '60s, and it's just not happened. I mean, between Vietnam War, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Grenada War, like the Iran Contra affair, the the Persian Gulf War, the return to the Persian Gulf, the war on terrorism, like all these things could have been catalysts for an international war to escalate to World War III, but it's just not likely the case. It will have to be something very provocative, like the blowing up of uh, that temple in Israel, which is shared by both Christians, Muslims, and Jews. Something on the nature of that might kick off World War III. But even still, like I said, today in today's age, I think that war will stay localized. Like I just don't see a, a war of that scale happening again. Like I said, I think it's gonna be mostly localized. But I can always be wrong. So we'll see. But all the wars that have been fought recently have been pretty localized between like um, two or three nations within that region, not something encompassing the entire globe. It could happen, like say, if the so-called Axis powers of Iran, North Korea, China, and Russia um, banded together to fight us, and I don't know, Israel, then yeah, that would definitely be a World War III type of scenario. But I don't see it happening. Plus, with international trade, everyone trades with everyone else, which is why trade wars are so bad because, um, you know, generally speaking, countries that trade with each other don't go to war with each other. So once you see a countries that stop trading with each other, that is dangerous. Uh, and like I said, for Generation X, we lived during the Cold War. The Cold War the Cold War existed from the 50s all the way up until 1991 when the Berlin Wall came down. And so our movies reflected that. War Games, which I'm about to have my wife watch with me probably next week, um, or Red Dawn, stuff like that, and plenty of other movies that focused on the hysteria around around the Cold War heating up. Like for instance, right now we're in a Cold War with China, but I don't see that warming up unless they finally do invade Taiwan because they've been intimating that they're going to do so. Now, if they do invade Taiwan, then yeah, that would escalate things. And the funny thing is, what people don't realize when they say that China was our ally in World War II, it wasn't the communist government that was our ally in World War II. A lot of people don't know as World War II happened, China was actually in a civil war between its national party and its communist party. They when World War II escalated, uh, they you know stood down and for a temporary truce, but it was the national party that aligned itself with the allies, and it was the national party that fled to Taiwan uh, after World War II was over because communist the Communist Party got the upper hand and took over mainland China, and so the National Party was the one that fled to Taiwan. So they are our true allies. Although we allowed the People's Republic of China to retain the, their seat uh, in the UN's Security Council. Same thing with like Russia. Like our allies then was the Soviet Union, although that quickly turned sour after the end of World War II. But with the dissolvement of the Soviet Union in 1991, we still allow Russia to keep its permanent seat in the UN Security Council. So, Carlin says a lot of Gen X got messed up from the Gulf War. Yeah, yeah, both of them. Um, because there was the chemical warfare that was going on and all that sort of stuff. Then I remember, the whole hysteria around anthrax and all that sort of stuff. But I don't want to just concentrate on the morbid stuff. Like, I just want to celebrate Gen X generally. And I was just saying how it was more fun as a young adult and teenager for Gen X because we could clubs were still popping back then. You didn't have to go there and buy bottles to try to have some fun because everyone was just there to dance and get their freak on. Um, um, Childhood just seemed more wholesome before the World Wide Web took over. Like, that's another thing people get misconstrued, Carlton, is that people don't realize Gen X we had internet in the 80s. Like, people don't like the internet was invented in the 60s by the military in their research and development, and email was invented in the 70s. So by the 80s we did have the internet, but we didn't have the World Wide Web because that wasn't something that was around then. It was because it was invented by the CERN research labs, and didn't become commercially available in the US until what, around 1993, I think. But yeah, we had internet, but most of the time when people had internet, and that was usually people who had money, because the average lower income to middle income family didn't have personal computers. I did. I had I had a computer when I got a computer when I was uh, 8 or 9. Didn't and like I said, didn't really have internet, like, but they had internet back then because you had internet servers like CompuServe, and AOL came out shortly around then, and a bunch of others. But internet was pretty much restricted to, like, email, playing games, or the big online discussion boards and stuff like that. The Usenet groups, stuff like discussion boards, Usenet groups, email, stuff like that. Playing computer games. That was pretty much all you could do with internet back then. Carlin said Gen X gave some of the best entertainment. Yeah, I'm gonna get into that in a second. But yeah, so we had internet back then, but we weren't dialed in like millennials and Gen Z were. Not until the late '90s. Um, so we had a more wholesome childhood where we actually went outside. Like, it was different. Like, usually parents would say we didn't stay outside long enough. Now parents today are fearful that their kids are going too far from the house. Like, the helicopter parenting today is weird because the very parents that helicopter parent their children, their parents wanted them to be out the house and have fun, and which was basically the parents being able to have their own time to relax and not be bothered with the kids. And, some people always talk about the whole thing about they would stay out until the night the the floodlights came on, and there was even like that little thing on the TV that said, "Do you know where your kids are?" That was real. like I went outside a lot, but even then, my parents didn't think me and my friends went out enough. They said, "You guys don't go outside enough." Literally went outside like every day, but we didn't stay out all day because we had Nintendo and Sega. Like I had a computer and I had Nintendo. Plus, I like to read, so I read. I would read my books. I played with my toys, and once we got cable TV, that like MTV kept a lot of us inside. Like Gen X was known originally as the MTV generation, right? Before we actually had an actual label, because like I said, the Gen X, the term Generation X, which I think again was created by the the Pew Research Center, that didn't come that label wasn't assigned to us until what the late 90s or something. But they were just calling us the lost generation before then, or the MTV generation, basically calling us stupid, saying that Bart Simpson was basically the prototype of a Generation X kid. Like people don't realize, like because the Simpsons have been out so long, people don't realize that Bart Simpson was originally designed to be like the concept of. He was designed to be the prototype of a typical Generation X kid. Because technically when he came out he would be like a year older than me. I remember watching it on the Simpsons on the Tracy Ullman show before they got their own independent spinoff in 1989. They were on the Tracy Ullman show, and so Bart was actually like a few years older than yeah Bart was like a few years older than me, and so he was seen as the prototype of a Generation X kid who was um, a proud underachiever. That's how they saw Generation X uh, kids back then. Um, but again, that's lost on people because Simpsons had to keep changing with each generation. But yeah, Bart Simpson was originally designed to be a Generation X kid, and he was basically made to mock us. uh, but yeah, with cable TV, I would stay inside a lot because I would come home, heat up heat up some sort of food and watch TV while doing like maybe some homework or playing with my toys. And then for a little bit, I would go outside because my friends were out there. Um, depending on what era, it was usually a girl that I liked in the neighborhood that I had a crush on. Um, or I would go over my best friend's house, who, depending on where I lived, because I moved several times, either he was a simple bike ride to his house, or I would have to wait until when I lived farther, I had to wait until the weekend when I could go over his house, whichever. But either way, I stayed busy, or I would take a bike ride way out to the library. Um, my mother later um, derided us for never using a bus. I was like, bus? I didn't even know there was a bus. Like this is in Illinois, not outside of Chicago, and I didn't know there was a public transportation system because looking back at it now, I still don't even remember seeing a bus. I'm sure there were plenty, but I never remember a bus because again, I used my dirt bike to get everywhere. I would travel my. I'm pretty sure there were several miles I've traveled on my dirt bike without blinking, and I never once thought about taking a bus because I don't remember seeing one, nor was I instructed how to take one. I don't know. My parents couldn't really blame me for not using the bus. Mind you, this is this is at the this is under the age of 13, so it would nowadays it would be weird to see you know young children riding a bus by themselves. But again, baby boomers did not care about their Generation X kids' security in that way, the way parents do today. The only thing that baby boomers were paranoid about when it came to their kids was there was this uh, there was this myth that there were satanic worshippers that would kidnap and abuse kids on Halloween. That was the only thing they were scared of back then. There was that was the boogeyman of the era. The boogeyman of this era are PDFs. But back then there was this whole worry that there were satanic worshippers lurking around every corner, waiting to abduct your kids, and that just wasn't true. Then there were a few, because I remember a girl telling me, she was like, "Well, I actually know a few satanic worshippers." I was like, "Oh, really?" She's like, "Yeah," but she's like, "Man, they're not worried about hurting anyone." She's like, she told me, uh, this is when I was in the seventh or eighth grade, eighth grade before I moved back to Maryland. She told me, shit. She's like, if anything, the satanic worshipers stay inside during Halloween because they're scared people are gonna think that they're up to something. And it wasn't until I was in my 20s that even learned that most satanic worshipers are basically just atheists who like to use Christian iconography to mock Christians. I didn't even know about that. I assumed like they were legitimately practicing Luciferianism or whatever, because I think satanic worship and Luciferianism are two different things. I don't know. Someone can tell me in the comments. But yeah, the majority of satanic worshipers are actually just atheists who just use Christian symbology to make fun of believers. Like they're atheists that are making fun of Christians by using their symbolism and iconography to poke fun of their beliefs and and basically poke fun of their superstitions. I can see why this would make them quite disliked. But again, the whole the whole mass hysteria of the 80s about satanic worshippers abducting kids was completely bogus. That was the only thing baby boomers were afraid of when it came to their kids. Anything else, they didn't care. They would send us to the store to buy them alcohol and cigarettes. Shit, they might let us smoke or try some of their liquor sometimes. Um, they told us to stay outside all day. Mind you, they didn't give us money so we could like go get something. I remember going to the pool and being at the pool all day long, hungry as shit. Cause like every time they did the break between the pool, like when they had to come in, they would do the break so they could clean the pool or whatever. And uh there was like a little recessionary stand, and we'd be sitting there like trying to pool our money together so we could buy snacks. Just hung because being out in the sun and the water all day made you hungry. Yeah, no money, just sitting there just baking in the sun all day, hungry as shit. Carlos says Gen X would be at home by themselves all day. Yeah, that was the other thing. We were latchkey kids. I was a latchkey kid at the age of 8 and 9 and 10. I didn't have a babysitter. Like the only time there was a babysitter was for my little sister because I was only 12 at the time, so I couldn't watch her at 11. Because when I was 11 and 12, I couldn't watch my little sister. Well, I could have, but I was a kid. So they would hire a babysitter who was like 16, 17, and I had a crush on her. And she would just pretty much like, she would pretty much just hang out with me anyway. Like I would be in there playing Nintendo, so she would come in my room and just watch me playing video games or whatever. Then she even brought over a friend of hers who was my age and was very popular at my junior high school. So I remember calling up my best friend one day when she came over. I was like, "Yo, what's?" I was like, "Yo, guess who's over here?" He's like, "Who?" He was guessing. I was like, "Nah." I was like, my little sister's babysitter brought over Rolanda. He was like, "What?" He's like, "Yo, Rolanda's over there." I was like, "Yeah." Like, imagine having like one of the most popular girls at your school just randomly pop up at your house, and she actually likes you. Do you know? Yo, that was one of the highlights of. I think that was that eighth grade. Because again, the beginning of eighth grade, I was still living in Illinois, but then my parents temporarily split. My stepfather and mother, not my father, my biological father, my stepfather, and my mother temporarily split, and so we moved back to Baltimore, and I finished the eighth grade there, unfortunately, because Baltimore sucked. And I'm not even talking about Baltimore City. This is the Baltimore suburbs. But even the Baltimore suburbs suck compared to being back in Illinois, which was just a more wholesome place where I had all my friends and all my, you know, my whole setup there. But yeah, I remember like one of the most popular girls in school that guys had crush on just randomly shows up in my house chilling, and it's sitting there like her and the babysitter who also was cute as hell, just sitting there, talking to me while I'm playing Nintendo. I'm asking, you want to play? I think she played with me, or she just watched. Most of the time, I was playing video games, but we were just talking about stuff, and she was. I knew she was going out with this one guy at one time, but they had broken up or whatever. And so I had to tell my homeboy, I was like, "Yo, Rolanda's here. Yo, she was like this cute little light skinned girl. It was man, stuff like this. This is like this is like wholesome type kid type stuff, right? It's not like how it is for millennials, where a lot of them were groomed online because they would do that whole internet dating ASL, age, sex, location, and then I'm not going to even go there, but that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, it was just so fun. It was wholesome. Let me get back to the comments. I honestly, a boogeyman these days is the TV. Children of the Corn vibes. I just rewatched that movie during the spooky season last year because I haven't seen it since I was a kid. And I was like, dang, this movie was spooky. Because I remember the first time I saw it, I was a little kid, so it was just spooky to me. I didn't really watch it all the way through, but I remember my parents being shocked at the movie. And then I watched it. I'm like, oh, I see why they were shocked because you got these little kids just murdering adults. But um, yeah, that was a good Stephen King movie. Of course, most of his movies were good, not because of him, but because of the people who produced the films, adapting his books into films. Because a lot of his books by themselves aren't that good, but when you have a really good filmmaker adapt them into a movie, it makes them enjoyable. Like The Shining. The Shine the film The Shining is better than the movie, which is why the sequel to the which is why the sequel that they made, which is a sequel to the book, but they made it into a film, isn't good because it's more closely connected to the original novel than it is to the original film, which was based off the original novel, which they changed a lot of things to make it more cinematic. Akana said she was Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt on Nintendo. I had better games than just Super Mario and Duck Hunt. I was probably playing something more sophisticated like Rygar or um, I don't know. It was so many Nintendo games I had. Plus, I used to often go to like um, I think like Blockbuster to rent Nintendo games. Because remember, you could rent the video games at the video store. So that's how I ended up playing a lot of Nintendo games, was renting them, or my friends and I would trade video games and play each other's video games. Because I mean, no one had. Because when I look back at the cost of these video games, like these games were like $50. These games were like $50 for one cartridge. And remember, and there was some they were cheaper, on the cheaper end, around like $30. Those were usually either the games that were older or were of lower quality. So the average for a good Nintendo game was around $50. And we're talking about, and that's expensive, because we're not talking about $50 in today's currency rates. We're talking about $50 in the currency rate of the late '80s, which is would that would be more equivalent to like $100 today, popping $100 per cartridge. That's a lot. Because like I said, you're talking about the late '80s. He's spending like 50, 60. And like I said, 50 was the average. So some of them cost 60 or even 70. That's a lot of money for one game. Of course, this is where I remember games being expensive back in the day. They were, like, when we look at it, I I roll my eyes at how much like, at the fact that I expected my parents to just shell out so much money for my entertainment. Like the toys, even, like, we look at the cost of the toys back then, we're like, oh man, they were so cheap back then. But we're looking at them through today's currency rates, not the rates of the '80s. When you look at you look at a $5 action figure back then, that's equivalent to like around $25 today, roughly speaking. And then you had the big play sets, which might be a few $100s. That's, you're talking about like something today that might be like around $500, $600. Um, it was crazy how much parents were willing to spend on us. And not to mention, a lot of kids, not me. I was the only one of amongst my siblings and cousins that didn't go, but most of my friends and cousins and other siblings have all, gone to Disney World. You know, if you lived either in the mid, if you lived either on this side of the country, even up until like even all the way up to like somewhere like Illinois or Michigan, most people will go to Disney World during the summer for like a week. It was affordable. Disney World is not affordable for a middle income family anymore, unless they like sell an organ or take out a second mortgage. But that used to be something that the average American family could do back in the '80s, was take their family to Disney World for like a few days or a week. And I'm pretty sure if you lived on the other side of the country, Disneyland was equivalent to that as well. Um, like National Lampoon's Vacation. What was the name of the the amusement park on National Lampoon's Waldo World or something like that? But I never gone. I never went, but I did still go to plenty of other amusement parks like Six Flags and King's Dominion, um, and what's the other one? And some minor amusement parks too, but I mean the big ones was like Six Flag, King's Dominion, and what's the one with the animals? Safari World, whatever it's called, I don't remember. But taking your kids to me, like, it was amazing how much parents spent, like, on our entertainment. That was a lot of money. So I look at that and see, and I have to tip my hat to my parents for being so generous for such, materialistic kids. Of course, I think because the economy was thriving back then, that made it more possible, and we weren't in late stage capitalism. Like I said, the average middle income family couldn't afford to go to Disney World now. Like maybe for a day, and then even if you did, you're gonna spend almost half the time in line waiting for like two rides. It's not even worth it. Matter of fact, if you do want to go to a Disney resort, you're better off going to Disneyland and flying across the country if you live on the East Coast like I do, because Disneyland is more affordable and it's less crowded. Even better are the Disney resorts in other countries, are way more affordable. Of course, you've got to afford to fly to those other countries like um, Euro Disney, uh, uh, Disney, Tokyo Disneyland. Uh, there's one in Hong Kong. Then there's another one in mainland China. Uh, Actually, I think there might be two in mainland China. I could be wrong. Like one in Shanghai and one in like Beijing. I don't know. I'll look that up. But like, yeah, there's the Disney resorts. Because I've never been to any Disney resort. I want to go to one overseas and take my wife, who's never gone either. So it's something we can do together since I never had. I was one of the few Generation X kids. Well, not one of the few. Let me correct, because a lot of Generation X kids grew up in meager, grew up um, coming up in a lower income working class sort of environment where they didn't have access to the things that I had as a kid growing up in the suburbs. So I'll correct. Unlike most suburban kids of the Generation X era, such as myself, I didn't get to enjoy Disney World. Whereas most suburban kids of the early '80s to early '90s got to go to got to enjoy themselves at one of the Disney resorts. Conan says it's mad expensive. Yeah, definitely. It's funny though that we had such great childhoods that we became these huge cynics in the '90s as teenagers. Well, some Generation X were teenagers in the '80s, um, but for the most part, I think that cynicism that people think of Generation X was more in the '90s than the '80s, and it started being shown in films and TV. Um, Especially like with the Kevin Smith films. Kevin Smith was definitely a product of Generation X, and he put a lot of the the cultural angst that we had as teenagers into his films. What's the one with the with them being in the mall? I forgot what that one is called. I like that movie. It has Stanley in it. Um, his first one was Clerks, of course, and then Clerks. A lot of the other movies were sort of like spin-offs from Clerks, or they weren't necessarily spin-offs of Clerk, but they would have the recurring characters like Silent Bob and Jay. Is it Friends, Martin, Fresh Prince of Bel Air? Yeah, I don't know. Martin seems more. Yeah, I mean it. I mean the shows were definitely geared towards our generation, but I was gonna say Martin Lawrence himself seems more of a boomer. I don't know. Bill and Ted, yeah, definitely Generation X film. I just have my wife and I watched that several months ago, and it was like the first time I've watched it since like the '90s. I watched the 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 third movie they made 3 years ago when they came back to do the final movie, which was okay, but seeing the original was funny, especially because it was you could get away with saying stuff like FAG back then in regular movies. Even um, Michael J. Fox said FAG in one of the in Teen Wolf. He's like, I'm not a egg. Or when Bill and Ted was like, they had their little moment. They was like, egg. So you can't even say that anymore. Is it Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Yeah, Encino Man, which was kind of whack, but it was funny when it kind of came out because I was still an immature kid. Wayne's World, yep. Weekend at Bernie's, yep. I love Weekend at Bernie's. That's why I like the show How I Met Your Mother because that was made for like younger Gen X. I couldn't really vibe with Friends the way I did with How I Met Your Mother was like like they were my age, so I felt the most connected to the characters in the How I Met Your Mother than in Friends because the Friends was geared towards older Generation X, the ones who were like teenagers in the '80s and now were adults in the late '90s. So um, I, plus the men were just effeminate in Friends, so I never really caught on to it like the Ross and Rachel thing. To me, that shit was gay. I'm sorry, that shit was gay. It was corny. Like How I Met Your Mother wasn't corny. Like it was good. Barney was the man. Ted was annoying, but I could still identify with him because he loved Star Wars. Because he was probably born in '77, like I was. So he was born in the year of Star Wars, so that was his favorite movie, and they all loved it. Then they would always make references to like stuff that I also loved. So How I Met Your Mother was like the perfect series for me. I tried to get my wife into it. She liked it, but then she said the show kept getting repetitive, which yeah, it did. But that's only if you started, if you binge watched it, it would get repetitive. But I loved How I Met Your Mother until the last season when they just fucked it up for no reason. I think that was always the way they were going to end it, but they could have done it so much better. But anyway, moving on. um, I'm thinking I'm gonna do a dual. I'm gonna do a run after this, like a short little jaunt. But I'm gonna finish some water and maybe watch something really quick, and then go off and do a little run. Colin says the late '90s, early 2000s, Gen X had the emo goth vibe. That's when movies like Blade, Matrix, and Resident Evil came out. Speaking of Blade, uh, so apparently Marvel Studios officially canceled Blade reboot with Mahershala Ali. And reportedly they wanted to make the character gay and a single father. Like, why? Why? Why the fuck did they want to do that to that character? That's crazy. Why would you make Blade gay? Just because his name is Blade doesn't mean he is a Blade. Yeah, Marvel fucking sucks, and this is why with Avengers Doomsday you're seeing them trying to turn back away from all the forced diversity they've been doing since 2019, because that's everything they've been doing since 2019 after Endgame has been trash, except for like a few exceptions like Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Spider-Man No Way Home, Deadpool and Wolverine. Those stood out. There's even a Halloween special they did about the wolf of whatever it's called, which is I don't know why it wasn't advertised because it was a really good Disney Plus film. It was only made for Disney Plus, and it was filmed in black and white to give that sort of nostalgia of like old monster films. It was really good. Then they later came back and did a colorized version, but it is better if you watch it in the black and white. That was really good. I don't, but it wasn't. It They did not market it at all, but it was, I don't know. And then people thought that that was going to be, they were going to take those characters and put them into the films, and they never have. But in any case, they're fucking up with Blade and other stuff. So look like the Russell brothers are pivoting towards a course correction, bringing it back to masculine heroes again, which is what we all wanted. Women didn't want these little boss bitches, and and straight men didn't want these boss bitches. Nobody wanted them other than a few blue-haired, septum-piercing fat fucks who don't even watch these movies in the first place. Anyway, congrats. Carden says I ran 6 miles today. That's what's up. That's good stuff. Because yeah, I heard they want to make Blade Rainbow. Yeah, it's trash. It's straight trash. So I'd rather them not make a reboot than mess up the character. Then other rumors there's going to be a new Black Panther in Avengers Doomsday. Hopefully, because like they could have brought him back with a new person playing him while staying true to the comics. He died once in the comics, and then he was brought back to life by the god of the Wakandans. I forgot what the Panther goddess is called, but she brought him back from the dead and made him king of the dead when he was resurrected. That could have been a thing they could have done in the movies. They could have brought him back from death, which would explain why he now looks differently. Plus, have his new powers now as the king of the dead. They could have done that. The MCU could have taken that storyline, but no, they wanted a they needed a girl boss with Shuri. No one likes, and no one finds it believable that some a chick that's like 110 pounds soaking wet is beating up all these people. Like the fuck out of here, man. And I'm sorry, I'm gonna say this, but she's not even attractive looking. Like she looks she looks emaciated, and she's ugh. Especially the actress, and then the actress herself has said some wild shit back when the second movie was released. Plus, I'm tired of the Black Panther movies just being infighting amongst minorities. Can they not fight up? Can they fight other people? Can they fight mainstream villains and stop fighting each other? Like seriously. First it was cousins, the cousin against cousin. Then it was the blacks versus the browns. Can we do something else? And it's not, and this isn't Marvel's fault. This is Ryan Coogler's fault because they've let Ryan Coogler make do the decision making on the movies. Like the main bad guy in the first movie should have been Claw, not his cousin. So whatever. Carlin said this other brother I watched on YouTube said people want the white man hero back. They do. This is why everyone celebrated Steve Rogers coming back. No one look. Pretty much everyone likes Sam Wilson, but no one wanted to see him be Captain America. Even in the comics that came out back in 2014, no one liked that comic book. It flopped. It didn't make sense. See, this is the problem with the MCU. They got arrogant. They thought because of the success of of the Infinity saga that Kevin Feige said he was now going to use the movies to present more female and diverse heroes. That's fine and good if these are well liked, fleshed out heroes. They didn't flesh out the characters in any sort of arc development where we could see them grow as heroes. They were just automatically just badass because we're we're gay, we're women, and we're people of color. They didn't go none of these diverse characters went through the hero's journey. The only diverse character that went through the hero's journey was Miles Morales, but that was done by Sony, not by Marvel, which is that's why people like Miles Morales because he's actually had the hero's journey. None of these other diverse characters like Ironheart, they just automatically badass because I'm black and therefore I'm smarter than everyone else and I'm a girl and I'm queer. Like what the fuck? Like no. This they all came out of the reboot of Marvel back in 2012 that was called the All New All Different Marvel, and no one liked the All New All Different Marvel from 2012 to like 2021. This was not a no one liked that shit. And when the Captain America came out in 2014 with Sam Wilson playing Captain America, that comic book series flopped. No one liked it. Just like no one liked the Miss Marvel when they introduced the Pakistani girl as her. Now, I like the character and the actress who played her is lovable and she could get the dick, but um, no one cared about Miss Marvel. They liked the original Miss Marvel who became Captain Marvel in the all new, all different Marvel, and no one liked her as Captain Marvel because now she was like this again, this little boss babe. And it was made even worse in a movie played by an actress who thought that the character should be stoic. Like that's not what a female hero is like. Like you're trying to make a female hero act like a male hero and then mad that people don't like it. It doesn't make sense. So this the Doomsday movie is going to be a course correction back to like masculine white heroes again because that's what people want to see. It's not that people don't want to see black heroes; they don't want to see a black hero, this a derivative of a more well-known white hero. That's only well that's only worked very few times in comic books. One is with Mr. Terrific. The reason it works for Mr. Terrific was that the original Mr. Terrific was a hero from the golden age of comics from the 1940s. No one remembers the original Mr. Terrific. So the new Mr. Terrific fits in fine with that. With Miles Morales, it works because he didn't replace Peter Parker as Spider-Man. He became a Spider-Man in his own right in a separate universe and then introduced into the mainstream 616 universe, but not replacing Peter Parker as Spider-Man, which is why it worked. And he also wasn't a Mary Sue character. Neither he nor Mr. Terrific are Mary Sue characters. So that's one. They're not Mary Sue characters. They actually have the hero's journey to develop into the hero that they are. Uh, they don't replace a more popular character who's still currently, in rotation like Steve Rogers or Superman or Batman. And three, they're not just diverse for diversity's sake. So, so I didn't like they gave Miss Marvel that haircut. Should have kept her hair long. You talking about Captain Marvel? You mean right? Miss Marvel is the Pakistani girl. Although Captain Marvel was the original Miss Marvel, but that's even confusing because the original Captain Marvel was Shazam, who was a DC character, whereas the first Miss Captain Marvel was actually a male in Marvel. His name was Captain Marvel, but then there was another Miss Marvel who was black who became Photon and confusing. Cyclops was turned up in that Doomsday trailer. Yeah, they finally one they gave him his actual uniform, and they realized they fucked Cyclops over in the original X-Men films. The X-Men films did Cyclops dirty. Like they made him. Cyclops is always look. Cyclops is in the comic books is on Captain America's level. Like he's a tactical and strategic genius. He is a leader. He's not just this little guy who brown noses Professor X like in like they showed like they did him dirty in both the X-Men cartoon in the early 90s and in the movies where he just was his character wasn't fleshed out. Then X-Men 97 came out 3 years ago and showed just how badass he was in the comics. And it looks like they're going to do that for him in this Doomsday movie because they did him dirty in the movies, had him killed by Phoenix in the second movie. It was just whack. And then they brought him back in X-Men Days of Future Past to finish out that because that originally that was going to be the original ending of the original run of the X-Men characters, and they want to turn it over to the new rebooted characters that came out under X-Men First Class, which was like younger versions of them. But they giving the man his due props in the trailer. So I hope that's what I don't want to see in the Doomsday is for the because I'm thinking that the X-Men universe is going to be destroyed in Doomsday, but I'm hoping they don't kill off the characters. We don't need to see Professor X die for a fourth time. We've seen him die 3 goddamn times already. 3 times we saw him die in X-Men 3. Then he died again uh, in Logan. Then he died in Doctor Strange and Marvel. The, the Marvel of Madness of whatever. The Doctor Strange Part 2, basically. We don't need to see Professor X die a fourth time. And hopefully they retain the characters, even if they do reboot them, because they said that after Doomsday and then Secret Wars, they're going to reboot the whole MCU. No, Cyclops isn't no. He's not Omega level. Storm is Omega level. Phoenix is Omega level. Iceman is Omega level. Um, Cyclops isn't. Wolverine isn't. They're just really powerful. Yeah, Professor X died in Deadpool and Wolverine. No, he wasn't in Deadpool and Wolverine. He was in did I did I remember? No, he was in like I said, he died in X-Men 3 the first time. Then he died in Logan. Then he died in Doctor Strange. Don't remember him because remember that was his twin sister that was in Deadpool and Wolverine. They didn't show him. They didn't show him in Deadpool and Wolverine. But yeah, I either way, I don't need to see him dying a fourth time. Like that's crazy. Especially Patrick Stewart is old. We don't want to see someone that old being killed off in a movie again and again and again because it's already, I mean, he's close to that very age already. So nah. But yeah, Anyway, I'm a go. Um, I know this is supposed to be a stroll through Generation X history, nostalgia, which I can always we can always revisit this when there's more people in here. The only other people that was chatting with me, Carlton, in the chat room was a few little retards whom I've conveniently ignored. If you noticed, um, especially when they just put that little said hi thing. That to me that always comes off as weird. Like, why don't you just say hello like a normal person? Like, I really hate that said hi thing. It comes off as very trolly. But anywho, I'm a I'm gonna go. I'm debating whether I'm gonna eat something first before I go for my late night run. We'll see. Said hi, buddy. But yeah, like I said, Moonlit wanted me to talk about a comparison between Trump and Reagan, and I'm like, no one's gonna get that point of reference who's not unless they're over the age of 50. Even most Generation X's, because we were mostly kids back in the early 80s when Reagan was in office. So I was like, that wouldn't, and I wouldn't know much about Reagan outside of very general things about him. So I couldn't point out his presidency compared to Trump's. For me, a better point of reference is George W. Bush and Trump. Even George Herbert Bush, the father of George W. Bush, would be no, it was George Herbert Walker Bush. That's the father. Even he would, even he, I wouldn't have that much of a reference to, even though he was president in the 90s, early 90s, right before Clinton. That was still like, he wouldn't be a point of reference for anyone under the age of 50. So I'm not that old yet. And Reagan definitely not. And I don't. And plus, I don't want to go on hearsay based on what our parents and grandparents said, because usually their ideas, once once you look at them more closely, tend to not be very good when it comes to like their understanding of politics. So with that, I'm gonna leave it. I'm out of here. But thanks for chatting it up with me. Hopefully, I'll get more people responding in the chat room. But it's Friday night, so appreciate it, brother. All right, take care, man.